You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. And yes, I am your host, Rick Franzi. And boy, do we have a good show planned for you today. Why do you ask? Well, for those of you that are watching the live stream, you can see that Carlo Odicino is our guest. He is the CEO and founder of One Team Partners. Carlo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to talk with you. I get particularly excited when I have a entrepreneur, which is most of the time, but also then a founder, because I get like two bites at the apple. So let's start with your origin story through the lens or perspective of what was the motivation, inspiration you had to start your firm?
That's a great question. And it really comes down to, if we sort of rewind to the start of my career, I've always spent my entire career working in the life sciences industry, and I define that as medical device, pharmaceutical companies, and diagnostics. And now that I've been doing this consulting thing for quite some time, I used to say about half my career was spent sort of working inside the company, and then half my career has been spent consulting with those types of companies. And it's really probably not that. It's probably now 75 consulting with 25 now, but we'll keep it at 50-50 for the sake of the story. But as I've been working with those companies and in the consulting industry, I start to feel a tension between wanting to do good work, whether it's working with a company that is developing products that really have a positive impact on patient lives, or on the consulting side, kind of working long hours so that you can help them, deliver their products and transform their businesses. But I saw myself burning out and feeling like there had to be a better way of doing business where you can get great results and avoid the burnout. And that was sort of the impetus of me thinking of wanting to start my own firm that was really wanting to take on that challenge. So One Team is an acronym that stands for our aspiration, which is to thrive every available moment. That's whether we're working or at home, just try. And it's an aspiration. Can we do that 100% of the time? No. But I like to call it a possibility to live into. And so that was really the emphasis of starting One Team and approaching it from a less traditional model, which is one and team are in that order on purpose, that if you really want to start to make a difference on others, it has to start with yourself. You're the one, and then you can engage with a team. So that's sort of the origin story of One Team. And we kicked this off in 2021, just after COVID, and here we are 4 years on.
So no judgment, Carlo, but it's interesting that you, to address burnout, you decided to start a company, which is like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Founders know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Any pivots to the business since you guys launched in 2021? Any change, or what have you learned since you launched?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I learned, when you launch any business and you're working, I've worked in small businesses, you obviously, you have a certain amount of arrogance thinking that you can, I can do this better. And it's a lot harder than starting something from scratch, and running it is a lot harder than you ever imagined until you've lived it.
Right.
We've had some slight pivots, and I wouldn't necessarily even say, yes, it was a pivot in the sense that we got a lot more focused on what we wanted to do. So I have a good friend who says usually when you're starting your own business and somebody asks what you do, your answer is yes. Like you don't ever want to.
Yeah.
So like and so really had to make a conscious choice to start dialing it in a little bit narrower. And so I always had a passion for life sciences, didn't want to move away from life sciences, but I also thought to myself, what we do isn't necessarily specific to the life sciences industry. And so what we did was sort of a twofold pivot, which is instead of life sciences companies of all sizes, we felt like we could make the biggest impact on life sciences companies that were early stage, pre-revenue, a lot of times where they have the funding to enter into clinical trials and ultimately have a commercial product, but they're not quite there yet. So really focus on that side, and then also extend that to early stage startup companies of any industry, right? Really wanting to focus on small, where we could interact with owners like myself or CEOs, leaders of the company, instead of working with the much larger global organizations, which I've done good work with those types of companies, but I'm humble enough to know that if they had never hired me, I think they'd just be just fine today. So it is one of those things that was our pivot. We really said, how do we bring this, what we believe is a strong expertise in how to grow and scale a business, but make it right sized for the company and appropriate for the stage that they're at. And so we really started to focus a lot more on designing a process that we walk everyone through, that helps them start to understand where they want to go and what are the challenges ahead of them.
Okay. So let's talk about a little more detail about One Team Partners. You've kind of defined the niche, and I love the fact that you have a niche. A lot of early stage entrepreneurs, they don't want to be restricted by having a niche, but your experience is a perfect example of having a focus on a niche allows you to see other related niches, so you can kind of stretch the niche beyond what your original focus was. But anyway, what problems are you solving? And for all the clients that you and your team work with, Carlo, is there a classic client that you've seen that really knows how to leverage and get the ROI from working with team partners? And if there is, could you kind of give us a sense for how they do that and who they are?
Yeah. So the clients that are probably the best fit for us, and this was a big learning that I've learned along the way, is every client isn't necessarily a good fit for us and how we go about doing our work, and we need to be very discerning about who we decide to take on as clients. But any company that is faced with what I would call wanting to graduate from where they are today to something, transform themselves into something more, whether it's scaling up. So I like using the analogy of you're graduating from 8th grade and going into high school, or you're graduating from high school and going into college, or you're graduating from college. That same analogy, I think, works in businesses, just on a more macro level. But a life sciences company that is nearing the end of their clinical trials and they want to transition or graduate from a clinical based company to a commercial company, or you're transitioning from, if you move that back even earlier, you're transitioning from a research and development company to a clinical company, or on a non-life sciences way, you're a single location company that maybe you have 10 employees and you want to now make it a multiple location and hire people on, where so you're graduating from a comfort zone into a growth zone, which then becomes uncomfortable. And then how do you walk them through that, and how do you transform in a positive way, dealing with all the things that come along with that? And so that's really where we kind of operate. And then people that really are, our approach is unique in that we sort of have this viewpoint, and it's not about having the right answers. I think we humans are very good at answering questions and coming up with answers. The challenge is asking the right questions.
Right.
Are you answering the right question is what's critical. And sometimes the question you're trying to answer is too short term because you don't have a long term vision that you're trying to anchor it to. And so that's what a lot of the work we'll do with early clients is really kind of crystallizing the early stage companies of like really crystallizing that vision and mission of the company, because understanding that that drives a lot. We hear a lot about vision and mission, and sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's a checkbox exercise. I'm going to roll my eyes. They're going to ask me to memorize a few sentences and be able to regurgitate them. And I said, yes, that's a lot of times how it's portrayed or it's perceived. But we really say, if you get your vision right, or the why you're in business, why you're doing this, that will drive a lot of your decision making. And that will set you up for success, because it not only drives your decision making, but it holds you accountable to the behavior that you should be exhibiting. And that's what really gets people to not only buy into your organization, but help your organization thrive, is how much do you live what you talk?
Yes. And doing that early in the company's life is transformative to hire the right people and attract the right clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the type of work that, while it's uncomfortable and sometimes hard to get to the point where you have consensus, once you're there, it really illuminates a lot of other decisions, makes a lot of other things easier once you have that, especially if culturally you bring that into the culture of your business. I love that. And thank you for sharing that in such kind of clarity and detail. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
In this role, Carlo, have you ever felt a little bit alone or maybe somewhat isolated as you're the founder and now CEO of your firm?
I have, but it's an interesting question, because when I started one team, I almost had this reaction. The folks that I hired early on, I didn't want to be called the CEO. I didn't want to be called the founder. And because I just wanted to see, I didn't want to set myself apart from that, right? I worked in companies where I felt like I didn't like when leaders tried to set themselves apart too much, and I didn't want to be that type of leader. And then the people that I've hired have been great, give me feedback on all of that. And they're like, no, Carlos, sometimes you don't need to apologize for being the CEO and founder, and just be that. And that doesn't exclude you from still being accessible. But I think in that role, there's still it and maybe not lonely, but isolated more. It's there, you have to find thought partners that you can kind of work through ideas with, and ideally some of them are inside the company, but sometimes you need that thought partner outside of the company that you can work through things and fine tune them before you're sort of presenting. And if you don't have that thought partner, then you're just like, okay, well, now I'm just talking to myself, and not being as effective as I could. And so I think that's the part where it's finding that balance. And I found, like, when I'm most isolated, it's actually I'm fighting not sharing something that really can be shared. Like, it doesn't need to be hidden. It's this drive towards, like, needing to have the answers and not showing how I come at the answer. And that was, one of the things that I had to overcome was feeling like in the role as CEO and founder, I needed to have all the answers, and instead of just saying, I don't know yet.
It's a delicate balance, though, isn't it? Because on one hand, people like to be collaborative in making decisions, but on the other hand, they sort of expect the boss to know certain things.
Yeah.
And it's hard. When do I tell them I really don't know and I could use their help? And Am I freaking them out too much because I don't seem to know anything anymore?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Completely. So
not everybody's cut out to be a founder of a company, and I think sometimes they only learn that after they try it. They
yeah.
realize there's too much weight in this job. I'm going back to work for somebody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay, let's turn you a little different direction and ask
Sure.
if you have a piece of business advice that's been particularly valuable to you that you've leveraged in your career, and if you have something like that, can you pay it forward and share it with my audience?
Absolutely. So they're two related, and I kind of touched on it in my answer to the last question. One, I've remembered it. I worked for GE as part of one of their leadership development programs. It was called the Experienced Commercial Leadership Program. A part of that program is a 2-year program. You're rotating every 6 months, and you get access as somebody who's essentially entry level to their divisional presidents and get to present to them and
Wow.
share research and address your recommendation to address a real business problem that they're facing. And I remember sort of the mentor of that program, as we were prepping to present to, or I was prepping to present to the first divisional president, which happened to be the head of GE Healthcare at the time. He said, "You will get asked a lot of questions. You will not know all the answers to the questions you get asked. Do not make something up. Say, I don't know." Right?
Well,
So, and it was really powerful what I got from that, which was because you saw the presidents say that too, because sometimes they were asked questions, and it wasn't that they always knew the answers. It was their comfort level with being able to say, "I don't know, but I will find the answer and I'll get back to you by such and such a time." And I think that's so powerful because it extends to the other piece of advice that it's the continuously learn. And in order to be willing to continuously learn, you have to be willing to be wrong. Like you're going to get it wrong sometimes, or you have to be willing to not know. And because that's how you find out. And so that kind of growth mindset, I think, in a willingness to say, I don't know, but I'll find out, and a willingness to always learn and challenge your own way of thinking.
I love asking the advice. I've been asking it for several years now. I've never heard the same answer exactly the same way on the show. So we keep asking it.
Yeah.
I think one of the advantages of working for large companies early in your career is exactly the kind of experience that you got, Carlo. I mean, that's probably paying you dividends in so many ways across I know that you also have an MBA from Notre Dame. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And I'm sure that's paid dividends as well. But that real life live fire in front of an impressive senior executive who sort of expects you and probably tests you. They probably enjoy it from their perspective because they get to mess around with the new kids on the block a little bit.
Exactly. And that's why, I mean, you appreciate the advice of like, it feels pressure. You did feel the pressure when you're asking a direct question. You're like, I don't know that I know the answer. And you feel this pressure that you should know the answer. And that's not
or
the
does he
expectation.
expect you might know the answer and like, I wish I'd have known that.
Exactly.
In my corporate days, whenever at any level, whenever we had to go and brief an executive or executives, we spent as much time anticipating the questions they might ask as we did preparing our own material. Because therein was the moment of where they either looked at you like, oh boy, or you moved the needle forward, right? You're in your credibility.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of moving the needle forward, let's talk about artificial intelligence. Carlo, what are you seeing in the industry with the clients that you're helping? How's One Team Partners looking at AI? Can you just give us a sense for that?
Yeah, I mean, AI has been an interesting journey because I've had the fortunate part of my career is I've worked at a company called Heartflow that was really on the cutting edge of machine learning and AI, and using that to develop 3D models of the coronary artery tree of a patient's heart from a CT scan, which allowed then the cardiologist to see if there's a blockage in the coronary artery tree without having to do any sort of invasive procedure. So, and in order to make those models faster, they needed to use AI to read the CT scan, because one of the maybe kind of interesting thing nobody ever thinks about is when a human is involved in creating this, in this case, this 3D model, it's a grayscale image, right? A CT scan is a grayscale image. Well, the human eye can only see a certain band of grayscale. We can't perceive out the full band of grayscale that the image produces, but a machine can. And so how do you create a machine that can then interpret what it's seeing and create this model without sort of the human intervention? And you still have some human intervention, but I think that is what I think is important, as you see now AI being used much more accessibly by anybody, where, image generation or creating things, is the importance of what I've heard called combined intelligence, not artificial intelligence. It's using this machine learning tool to augment weaknesses that humans have, but combined, it's a much better, kind of gets better outcomes than either just the machine or just the human. And I think that's where we still have to learn how to do that. I think a lot of the publicity you see is, oh, AI is going to replace the human. And I said, I don't think it needs to. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're just solely looking at augment what a human can do by, in the very simple example that I said, by giving it a tool that can read the full spectrum of grayscale, because that's just something that we're not good at. But we're good at interpreting different things or coming up with solutions once presented with the data. And I think that's the part I kind of say tongue in cheek, that AI right now the people are, I think it's somewhat like a parlor trick. But it really is used in very impactful ways in the life sciences, and particularly like being able to take genetic sequencing and amplify it, and then be able to use that as a means to diagnose certain types of cancers. That's a very powerful use of AI, and I think that's where you're starting to see. I think that's where we'll start to see the real benefit come to life, is being able to use a tool that can quickly iterate and amplify things that may be undetectable under previous tool sets. And that's what gets exciting to me. And then you can use AI to automate almost anything. My question is, or you can just stop doing it. Don't use AI. Like some of the stuff, oh, we'll use AI to stop doing it, or to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, have you ever thought of just not doing it at all? Like, don't even have the machine do it. Like, just stop. Like that, simplify your life instead of trying to get it to automate things that you just don't want to do. There is always an opportunity to not do it at all, because it's not a value-added activity for you to do. And so in our business, really our model is sort of, in as simple terms as possible, to make machine learning as effective as possible. At least today, you really still need structured data for it to learn from. So there's this concept of like AI can handle unstructured data. I'm like, well, it kind of learns from structure. And so that's how it learns. And then, yeah, it can handle unstructured scenarios, but it really is just more leveraging what it can discern from a structured data set. And so that's where really kind of we look at the more pragmatic application, is how do we first make sure we understand the data, structure it, and then have the machine then be able to consume it on a mass level and iterate on it, that we would have no means to do it in a pragmatic way, manually. And then use that, what it's sort of the insight it can get, and then augment it from your own insight, and you're off to and running. And then I think that's where that combined sort of intelligence really starts to take off for us. So I'm excited. I'm a little bit more of a skeptic as to some of the stuff that I see coming on, like you can ask ChatGPT something. I said, have you ever noticed if you're a true expert in a field, what ChatGPT comes up with is kind of vanilla, but then if you're not an expert, then it sounds really good. I'm like, well, what's changed? It's just your knowledge set of whatever
Right.
subject level. And so if you're okay, like if being sort of average or that average knowledge, sure, ask an AI model to kind of give you an answer on something that you don't really know, but use it to drive your curiosity to learn more about it instead of just it being the answer.
That's really good. That's a great way to wrap that conversation up on AIs. I like that. Yeah, you still need your own curiosity to do more
Yeah.
research. One data set is not enough to form
Yeah.
decisions. You should have
Yeah.
multiple data sets. All right, let's talk about the future, Carlo. Where are you taking you're going to be back on the show in a few years. What's going to be different? What's your vision for the future of your company?
My hope, and again, this may sound kind of funny. So our vision is thrive every available moment so that we can help others do the same, in the hopes that then they do
Sure.
it. And so it's a geometric progression in that way. And so I don't know the answer to it today, but I would love for it to be 5 years on and we start seeing the visible results of that is somebody that was impacted by, we may not even know who they are, but they were impacted by what we did with some individual who then sort of paid it forward. And being able to see that kind of feedback of like, oh, our theory worked because strangers are living it.
Well, that's an experience-based vision of the future, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
kind of cool. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone wants to connect with you or learn more about the company. How do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, encourage people to go to our website. It's oneteampartners.com. And
Is that the number one or the ONE?
spelled out ONE, oneteampartners.com. And on there you will see a link that you can book some time with me. And I say every client we've ever had, I was always started with one conversation. And so let's have that 30-minute conversation and see where we can help. So.
Well, I said at the top of the show, we had a good one planned for you. And Carlo, you did not disappoint. You hit it up. To use a baseball analogy, since we're coming up on the season, you hit it out of the park, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed
Thank you.
it. And thank you to the audience. You're just a part of Orange County's longest running business talk show here. Carlo's episode is going to join now our catalog of over 1,500 interviews that we've done over the years that we've been on the air. If you happen to be an Orange County entrepreneur or you're an Orange County leader of a nonprofit organization and you would like to share your story the way Carlo just did, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. If we're not connected, I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Let me know in the message that you'd like to be a guest on the show. Between Haley and myself, we'll be happy to get you ready for a future episode and tell your story on our platform. And until the next time we all have a chance to be together, I hope each of your business decisions move your organizations in a positive direction.